My name is Denise Dubrovic, and I am the principal and assistant superintendent here at New Trier. I'm principal on the Winnetka campus, and I'm so happy to see all of you this evening. Before we start, I wanted to ask one thing. If you could kind of do a show of hands, how many of you in here have a current freshman? Okay. How many of you have a sophomore? And I know you might have both. And then what about a junior? Okay, good. So we have a really good mix here tonight. So thank you so much. So some of you may know that today, Jeff Selingo spoke with our class of 2027. So we ended up having one class be able to have a presentation with him, and it was excellent. And I've already heard from some parents that kids went home and said, "Mom, Dad, you got to come to this." So if you heard that from your students, we appreciate the positive feedback, and it was exceptional. And you know, anytime we have somebody come in, I tell you, I am so proud of our students. They get in here, they're in their seats, and they're engaged. So it's just a show of the class of our students and the desire to really want to be a part of this and listen. So I think to start off, I want to say, I think we all know this, but the college admissions process looks so much different than when we entered school. Students are beginning to think more seriously about what comes after high school, whether it's college, a gap year, military, or even a trade program. And with those possibilities come these really big questions and important decisions and a fair amount of uncertainty. One thing we do know in this process that works best is the partnership. And we could not have a better partnership than all of you in this room. The families, we talk about the advisors in that partnership. We also talk about the students in the partnership. And also I want to highlight our post-high school counseling, who's all here this evening, who's in that partnership too, and puts a lot of work and dedication into understanding not only your students, but the application process. They sit on all kinds of boards throughout the country at colleges, and they reach out to admissions directors to ask, what is it we need to know and understand, and how can we better prepare our students for the right fit? And I think that's the theme tonight that we're going to hear, is the right fit for individual students. And that's why I'm so pleased to introduce the New York Times bestselling author, journalist, higher education expert, and a parent of a current sophomore, also known as rising junior, right? And an eighth grader who's a rising freshman. So he himself has experience going through the process of finding the right fit for his children. In the book tonight that we're going to be talking about is The Dream School, Finding the College That's the Right Fit for You. I think what was so poignant today was he really captured the students' attention to understanding that it's really a very thoughtful process and that there's no single perfect place. And he talked a little bit today about, well, how do you pick your top, what do you think the top schools are? And sometimes we look at top schools as what we see in social media, what we see on sweatshirts. So really trying to make sure kids understand that there's a lot of values that they have, that they hold, and that they have some agency over the process. But it's what you have to think about and how you have to explore that to make sure that they're finding that right fit. We're really grateful that you're here tonight, Jeff, that you took the time to be here all day. He also spoke with our staff after school, so I feel like Jeff's been with us 24/7, and we really appreciate the attention that you've given us. In tonight's session, he's going to be sharing the insights of the book. Then we're going to have it followed by a discussion with our post-high school counselor, Mr. Bob Zigmund, and then we're going to have time for a Q&A. So when you came in this evening, you should have received a card, an index card, so you can write questions on. So we want to leave some time that we can answer those questions. So our NTPA is going to be going around and making sure you have the cards, and then we'll be picking them up when we get ready, right time before we begin with the Q&A. So they're going to go, are you passing them out now then? Oh, okay. Yep, perfect. So we'll go around and make sure people have those. And so without further ado, please join me in welcoming Jeff Selingo.
And Bob, I took your microphone, but I'll give you the other one. Anyway, it's great to be here tonight. Thank you so much for coming out on what turned out to be a pretty nice day here. It didn't start out that way, so appreciate you taking some time tonight. So I wrote Dream School. It came out last September, made the New York Times bestsellers list, and I don't know if you could see the other two that appeared at 8 and 9. Those two books could be also about college admissions. If you could see their titles, I know this is an anxiety-ridden process, and so there are a lot of books about college admissions out there. I wrote Dream School as a follow-up to the Yellow Book, Who Gets In and Why, A Year Inside College Admissions, because I wrote that book 6 years ago because I heard over and over again just how much different the college search process is probably when many of us in this room went to college. And there's no doubt about it, it has changed a lot, especially over the last 20 years. In fact, the number of applications filed to American colleges and universities has gone from about 4 million in 2001 to almost 14 million in 2023. And to put that number in context, the number of high school graduates has only changed by about 800,000 in that time. So what has happened? So students, I don't know about you, but when I applied to college in 1991, using my parents' Smith Corona electric typewriter, I got kind of tired about typing applications after number 3. Today, students average 8 applications, and in many schools, students are filing 10, 12, 14 applications, and this is what we've seen. But not only that, they're applying to a lot of the same schools over and over again. And why is that? As I traced in Who Gets In and Why, we've seen a lot of things happen over the last 20 years, but 3 things in particular has driven that top line number. Number 1 is just communications and travel has just made getting to so many colleges across the country much easier, right? So in the 1980s, when my sister went to college pretty far away, she would have to call on a dorm room phone, on her floor, after 10 o'clock at night when the long distance rates went down. Right now, we could be in touch with our kids who are halfway across the country on a device like this multiple times a day. So somebody going from Chicago to LA or Chicago to New York to go to college is not much different today than it was to somebody who went to college next door 20 or 30 years ago. Second, the Common App, right? The Common App has made applying to multiple colleges so much easier by just pressing a button, unlike when I applied to college and we had to type out each individual application. And then third, I think many of us, and I say this also as a parent of 2 teenagers at home, many of us are worried about our kids and worried about the future and the future job prospects. And we think that going to the most highly selective college is going to give them some insurance policy that will make sure that everything will be okay for them. And so that's what's happened over the last 20 years. It has meant not only this huge increase in applications overall, but a lot of those applications going to the same schools over and over again. So when I wrote Who Gets In and Why, and I laid that out, I would come into auditoriums like this and speak to parents and students and counselors, and afterwards, a lot of parents would come up to me and they would say, but what if we don't want to go to one of these highly selective schools? What if we can't get in, right? Because we know the acceptance rate at these places has gone down. What if we can't afford one of those schools? What do we do? How do we make sense of the rest of higher education? And in many ways, it made sense to me as I thought about it because there are 1,400 four-year colleges in the U.S. 1,400 four-year colleges in the U.S. And that's a big number of institutions, and you're trying to figure out, well, what among those institutions is a good one for me? And so what we do often is go to the rankings, right? We tend to think, well, the rankings must tell us something, but when we go to the rankings, they tend to be more confusing than clarifying because the same schools appear over and over again at the top of the rankings. And in many ways, the rankings conflate something around quality that we haven't really come to terms with, and that is, if the school is hard to get into, it must be good. And tonight, if I leave you with anything tonight, I want to leave you with this idea that quality is not equated with a low admissions rate. There are many good colleges out there. I'm not here to tell you not to apply to the top colleges, but as you can see from this, with so many applications going to those top colleges over and over again, harder to get into. So tonight, my goal is to try to widen that lens so that your list is more balanced with a number of those highly ranked, hard to get into schools, but a number of other good schools, and I'll talk to you tonight a little bit about what you're looking for in those good schools. And I get it, right? Not only do I live in a community like this back in Washington, D.C., but we did a survey for Dream School when we started it out because I wanted to figure out, how do we think about prestige? And I asked parents in a survey of 3,000 plus parents for the book, I asked them, how important is prestige to you in the college search process? In other words, how important is it that your kid goes to a top-ranked, brand-name, prestigious college? 16% of parents in this survey of 3,000 said it was really important to them. 16%. I don't quite believe that. I think it was a little bit higher, but 16% said it was important to them, very important to them. Then we said, how important is it to your kid that they go to a prestigious, highly ranked, highly selective college? 28% said it was really important to their kid. And then this is where it got really interesting. We asked them, how important is it to other people in your community? How important is prestige to other people in your community? 62% said it was important to other people in their community. So even if we want to widen this lens, as I'm encouraging you to tonight, we see all this pressure around us. We see it in the sweatshirts I saw students wearing today. We see it in the Instagram posts about where students are going to college. We see it in the stickers that we put on the back of cars, that there is only a certain set of schools to go to, and that gets into our mind over and over again. And indeed, in the intro to Dream School, I met a student named William who grew up in the Twin Cities, and he wanted to go to the most prestigious school he could get into. And I said to William, I said, okay, so where did you apply? He was thinking about applying to either Stanford, Northwestern, or Columbia Early Decision. Now, I know we have a mixed crowd here tonight, so early decision, you apply usually in early November, you find out in mid-December, and if you get in, it's a binding decision, your search is done. And so a couple of days before, he was still trying to decide between those three schools because he wanted to basically maximize his chances. And so at the last minute, he decided to apply early decision to Columbia. A month later, he gets in. And then he shows up on campus, obviously, the following August. And as he told me, it was akin to winning the lottery. And he's not wrong about that, right? The year he applied and got into Columbia, it was a 5% acceptance rate. But he gets to campus in August, and he said the high of the wind started to wear off. First thing is, he went to meet with his advisor, and he wanted to get into a particular class, and he said his advisor said the waiting list for that class is so long, you might be lucky to get into a junior or senior year. Since he grew up near the University of Minnesota, he was able to do research at the University of Minnesota as a high school student, so he went to see this professor he wanted to do research with at Columbia, and the professor said, yeah, I don't work with undergraduates. He wanted to try out a bunch of clubs that he never got to try out in high school, and he said the competition to get into some clubs was harder than it was to get into Columbia itself. And so the high of this wind started to wear off. By the time he got home for winter break, he told his mom, I think I want to transfer. And by the end of his freshman year, he did. He transferred to the University of Minnesota, where I caught up with him years later. And he said he found his people, he found his professors, who he thought were just as good as his professors at Columbia. But more than that, he was able to join clubs. He was able to do undergraduate research. He did all of those things. And I said to him, I said, William, all these things you had discovered about Columbia, once you got there, you could have actually discovered during the search by asking the right questions. Can I do undergraduate research here? How hard is it to get into clubs? How hard is it to get into these classes? And he said, I know. I didn't ask those questions because I was blinded by prestige. I was blinded by the fact that it's hard to get into, so it must be good. And in fact, we often think of that number, right, the admissions rate, but colleges and universities think of a different number, and that's called yield. So you could apply to 8, 10, 12 colleges. You could even get into 8, 10, 12 colleges, but you could only go to one. And every college wants to be that one. And so they really focus on yield. Now, you're probably thinking, well, why do I, as the applicant, care about yield? What does it have to do with me? So I'm going to put this into very specific terms with 4 schools. So as you can see, back in 2001, when students applied to fewer colleges, it was actually very easy for colleges to determine who was really interested in enrolling if accepted. So back in 2001, Brandeis, Duke, Syracuse University, and George Washington University all had similar yield rates, around 40%. So here's how it affects you as an applicant. So that was back in 2001. Duke, since then, joined the other elite colleges there at the top, and their yield rate actually went up, and they did that through things like early decision, early action, deferring students in early action, waitlisting students, doing everything they could to keep students just out of the applicant acceptance pool so they wouldn't have to count as an acceptance until they really needed them. Meanwhile, Brandeis, George Washington, and Syracuse, all of their yield rates started to drop and now are closer to 20 or under 20%. And here's where this impacts you as the applicant, because what ended up happening at the Syracuses of the world and the George Washingtons of the world is every time their yield dropped, the following year they had to accept more students. And when they accept more students, their acceptance rate goes up. And to you, you're thinking, wow, they used to accept 20% of students, now they accept 30 or 40 or 50% of students. That must mean their quality has gone down. It has nothing to do with quality. It's a head count measure that colleges have become very good, especially the most elite colleges, very good at managing so that they basically yield as many students as they can among those they accept. So don't think of acceptance rate as equaling quality. So what should we think about when we think about quality? So when I did that survey of 3,000 plus parents, one of the things they told me over and over again in that survey and in follow-up interviews, and I'm sure if I asked all of you tonight about what your dreams for your kids are when they go to college, is so many people told me, number one criteria, student engagement. You want your kids to go off to college and go to their classes, meet professors who are going to spark an interest in something, meet friends for life, not be a spectator to the college experience. Student engagement ended up being number one on my survey. Well, what's interesting is that every year for the last 20 years, Indiana University has done this national survey on student engagement, measuring how engaged students are in college. It's a great survey. 1,400 colleges have participated in this survey over the years. It surveys freshmen and seniors on a number of measures, how often they go to class, who they study with, extracurricular activities, internships. It asks them a number of questions. The only thing I don't like about this survey is they don't release the results publicly. They only release them back to the school. But I wanted to know if we think that selectivity equals quality equals a better engaged student, are students at highly selective colleges more engaged than everyone else? That question, the National Survey of Student Engagement said they could answer. And so what I did is I separated all the schools into 5 buckets of selectivity. So the most selective schools are there at the top in blue, least selective colleges down there in the red. And then we got the results back. The first thing that they asked, we only looked at senior results here. The first thing is overall satisfaction. And as you can see, those dots are basically on top of one another. Definitely higher satisfaction at the most elite schools, but the researchers found, and they had never done this research before, they had done this just for this book, they had found that there's no statistical difference between overall satisfaction of students at the highest selectivity schools and the lowest selectivity schools. And then we started to dig a little deeper. On a number of measures, there was incredible overlap between schools in different buckets. Now, highly selective schools always did well. As I said, I'm not here to tell you not to apply to those schools, but we tend to think students at those schools are much more engaged in their learning than everywhere else. But we saw in so many measures that students at other schools were just as engaged as these highly selective schools. The interesting one is on the bottom. It's hard to see, but selective schools, that green dot, is actually the highest. In other words, students found out what William found out at Columbia, that there's more faculty to student interaction at slightly less selective schools than the most selective schools. Most selective schools are great places, no doubt about it, but many of their faculty, not all, but many of their faculty are really focused on graduate students and research and less on undergraduates. And as I told the students today, you're thinking about what's next, not what's 4 or 5 years from now. But the highly selective schools did do well on a couple of things. Completing an internship, participating in leadership, working with research with faculty. Now, William didn't find that at Columbia, but many students do. Studying abroad, they scored well above the line on all of these things. But here's the thing about any of these activities, you could participate in them at many different places. And in fact, Emily, who is a student I met during the college search, she was trying to decide between Rice, Vanderbilt, and the University of Mississippi. Now, when I tell this story, people always think, well, she had to choose Rice or Vanderbilt, right? So Emily decided to go to Rice the weekend before she had to make a decision. She ended up going to Rice with her dad, and afterwards they went for coffee across the street, and she made a pro-con list about what Rice would give to her. And the only thing she told me she could come up with the pro list was that people would know she was smart because she went to Rice. She ended up going to Ole Miss, full scholarship. She got support. So Emily decided to go to the Ole Miss, again, full scholarship. She got study abroad support, undergraduate research support, right? She got to do those activities that students at highly selective colleges do. And last fall, I got to catch up with her when the book came out. And one of the things she told me was that she's now on a Fulbright in Germany. And I said, what about the other students on the Fulbright? Where are they? Where did they go? And she's like, oh, they went to Northwestern, and they went to Michigan, and they went to Harvard, and they went to Yale, and all these other places. And I said, what happens when you tell them that you went to Ole Miss? She said, I get this kind of look, like, where's that? Why did you go there? But then they look and they say, well, we're all doing the same thing now, right? We're all doing the same thing. And by the way, she told me, I went for free, and now I have all this flexibility in terms of what I do next after this Fulbright. And indeed, and this is the slide I guess we're not going to get to see, but that's fine. Maybe we'll show them during the Q&A if we figure it out. We saw this throughout the book, right? Where students end up has a lot less to do with where they went and a lot more to do with what they did while they were in college. Much more to do with that. And in fact, the graphic I'd be showing you right now shows, again, by selectivity, we looked at the Fortune 50 companies as a proxy for good jobs. Not necessarily, we had to come up with some sort of proxy. And we found that students who went to all different sets of selectivity in terms of rankings still ended up at these Fortune 50 companies. And in fact, among the CEOs of the Fortune 500, there are 300 different undergraduate colleges and universities represented. So where you go has less to do than what you do wherever you go to college in terms of outcomes. So what are we looking for in terms of how do we find these good colleges? Because we're still, it's starting to come back up. We're still presented with this problem that I introduced to you in the beginning, is we're still trying to decide between 1,400 colleges and universities. Oh, there we go. Perfect. That's the graphic I was talking about. So as you can see, even if you're starting at a school that accepts between 60 and 80%, this is just showing 3 different institutions here, by the way, or 3 different companies, you're still ending up at these Fortune 50 companies. Again, going to these top colleges will definitely open doors for you, but it doesn't mean going to other places will close doors for you. So what are you looking for? If you could just advance it. If you could just advance it once, because now I think this is off. Thank you. There we go. So what are you looking for in a college? And then I'm going to call Bob up, and then we'll start discussions. So what are you looking for in a college? I don't want to give you a laundry list, so I've broken it down to 4 key things that I think you're looking for in a good college. And at the end of the book, I named 75 new dream schools. These are schools that are accessible, meaning you could actually get into them, and many of them do a lot of these things. They don't do everything. No one's perfect. There is no perfect fit, but many of them do these things. Number 1, a place that gives you a supportive start. We think that our kids, they're coming out of this great high school, they're just going to ease into college and it won't be a problem at all. But 25% of college freshmen drop out after their freshman year at all different colleges. 25% do not make it to their sophomore year. And so I'm looking for places that are going to give them that supportive start. Often, these are called first-year programs, first-year experiences. So this is one thing I ask on college tours often, is tell me about your first couple of months on campus. I ask students this all the time. Tell me about your first couple of months on campus. I want to know, did they get to know a faculty member? How did they meet their friends? What was their living situation like? How easy was it to join clubs? Because what happens in that first semester of college is critically important. When we went to college, we probably had a professor at the front of the room who said, look to your right, look to your left. One of you won't be here by the end of the year. And we took that as a sense of pride. Well, I actually want my kid to succeed, right, when they go to college. And often now, these first-year experiences build that in. Second, how easy is it to find other connections, not only to faculty members, to coaches, to advisors? How often will they be around adults who will watch out for them, right? In a class of, nothing against big colleges, but in a class of 500 students or 300 students, it's going to be really hard to get to know that faculty member who are going to have eyes on you, know your name. How easy is it to do that? So when I go on college tours, I'm always watching how students are interacting with each other. Do they have AirPods in? Are they looking down at their phones? Are they talking to one another? Are they sitting with one another? To see how easy these connections are. 3 is real job experience. We saw in our research for Dream School that if you have some sort of experiential learning experience, that could be an internship or a co-op, but it also could be undergraduate research. It could be a class project that goes deep with an outside company, some sort of hands-on learning experience. You're half as likely to be underemployed after college if you have one of those experiences. Now, many colleges will tell you, oh yeah, we give internships and things like that. I want to know, how does it happen, right? I want to know, well, tell me about your most recent class, right? Where did they intern? Your last year's juniors or last year's sophomores. Find out more stories behind those statistics. And then finally, the biggest finding from the book is what Emily did and decided to skip over high prestige. So at a Vanderbilt or at a Rice, she was going to have to pay almost full price at both of those places. And with institutions now, at some of those places now, approaching $90,000+ all in for 1 year times 4, she decided, along with her family, you know what? I'd rather save that money that we've saved for college. I'd rather not take out loans in order to have that support after college, for graduate school, for launching into a career. And so one of the things we saw over and over again is that parents are starting to make decisions as a family to say, well, you know what, there's a certain level of prestige we're willing to pay for, but we're also looking for value. And many of the schools, including those in the back of the book, they deliver that value. They have great outcomes. They have great undergraduate experiences. And by the way, they also offer great financial aid, even merit aid to those who might not qualify for need-based aid. And they give that value. These, to me, there's many more things we could think about in finding a good college, but these, to me, are the 4 key elements as we go out there and we try to make sense of that world of 1,400 colleges and universities. Before we get started on the conversation, I want to end with a story because I want to talk about what we need to do as a parent community. How we change the conversation about colleges to, instead of talking about the same 20, 25, 30 all the time. How do we widen that lens so that we could be proud that our kids have agency in this process and have made these decisions? It's really up to us. And here's where it starts. So I told the students today this story. When this book first came out, I was in Denver the week after it came out, speaking to an audience similar to this. And during the Q&A, a mother comes up to the microphone and says, my daughter wants to go to Stanford. And I said, well, I guess you weren't here for the last 45 minutes of this conversation, but that's okay, right? Because I did say, I'm not discouraging you from applying to these top schools. And she said, what else does she need to do to get into Stanford? What else does she need to do? And I said to her, what else does she want to do? And she looked at me and she said, what do you mean? What else does she need to do? Does she need to take another AP course, join another club, become captain of another team, start another nonprofit? What else does she need to do to get into Stanford? And I said, here's the thing. She might do all those things that you just mentioned. She might apply to Stanford. She'll put that all in her application. That application will land at Stanford. An admissions officer will open it up on a Wednesday. I saw this when I was doing Who Gets In and Why. They'll look at it maybe 5 minutes, maybe 7 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, depending on the round and how many applications they have, and they'll make a decision. And in many cases, they will have one seat for every 10 applicants they get. And probably 6 or 7 of those applicants will be highly qualified. Highly qualified. And so the decision might not go the way you want. And that decision will come back. And if it's a denial, and I hear this so often right now as we're ending the end of April, students will say, like your daughter might say, what did I do all of that for? Why did I take that extra AP course? Why did I do all those things? And so if you're doing it because you want to do it, you want to challenge yourself in high school, great. But if you're doing it to please that anonymous admissions officer on the other side of the desk who you'll never get to meet, you are missing out on what is great about high school and the high school experience. And that is this sense of exploration, a sense of discovery, a sense of trying on things, figuring out what fits and what doesn't. And that's why you should be doing it. That's what high school is about. It's not a tryout for college. So I thank you tonight for coming, and let's get the conversation started. Thank you, everybody.
Hello? There we go.
Perfect.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Bob Zygmunt. I am one of the post-high school counselors here at New Trier. We have a staff of 9 counselors, all of whom are amazing and incredible, and I'm lucky to have them as colleagues. I am also the liaison for the class of 27 within our office, so I get to have the great opportunity to chat a little bit more with Jeff, kind of representing our office and also New Trier, and then we're going to have some Q&A generally from the audience beyond this. So thinking of the slide that was just up, those main points, and thinking of your points too about student engagement, I think that's a great emphasis to have, to think of those points as well, right? So thinking of what does the campus offer in terms of first year experience, what does the campus have to offer in terms of community involvement, in terms of career placement, but it still is on the plate of the student to take advantage of those things. And I think your closing points about students really enriching themselves in their high school experience, it gives them that foundation to do just that. So I think those points can really go hand in hand. So I think continue to build great habits with your students that they already have, but even this small is making sure they're in advisory every morning and really engaging with that program, making sure they're really engaging with seeing their teachers outside of class when they need support, thinking about other opportunities to get involved on campus. That's just gonna give them that primer to sink their teeth into these points that Jeff is making about these amazing schools and what they can have to offer. Because they can offer the moon, but if the student doesn't want to leave their dorm room and go take advantage of it, then in some ways all for naught. So I think those are awesome things to think about. Something else to make note of, I know is mentioned briefly, you spent quite a number of years at the Chronicle of Higher Education, which in our industry is kind of the de facto periodical. We get it in our office. It covers a lot of things with admissions, but also higher education as a whole. So there's some kind of reference points in here I want to make about that, just as a point of reference. So my first question, thinking of things to discuss. So you emphasize that success in college often comes from the, quote, hidden curriculum, internships, mentorship, and real-world experiences. How can students be intentional about accessing these opportunities from day one instead of leaving outcomes to chance?
Yeah, so I think it's really important. So if you want to access these things from day one, you have to know that a college offers them, that you have the opportunities to take advantage of them. And let me just go with internships as a one point of reference on this, right? So 8 million college students say in surveys they want an internship in college. 4 million get them, right? So there is a gap of about 4 million students who want an internship and don't get them. And so often if you don't end up at a school, and there's very few schools that kind of guarantee a work experience as part of the undergraduate experience, so Drexel and Northeastern and Cincinnati, there's a number of co-op schools that kind of guarantee it as part of the undergraduate experience, right? It's built into the curriculum. You're going to end up at schools where they say, well, we highly encourage it, or it is required for this major. But often you won't really know what that means. And so the thing so to take advantage of it means that you actually have to have the ability to do that. And so I think it starts now, right? It starts as you're looking at schools, what are those undergraduate hands-on learning experiences? If they're not internships or co-ops, do they get to work on projects, right? There's a number of schools now, I'm affiliated with ASU, where students get to work on like 2-week sprint projects for outside organizations. They could be nonprofits, they could be for-profit businesses, they could be big companies, where students are working on real-world problems over a course of a couple weeks in a class. Many of those students then are tapped, the most talented students in those sprint projects are tapped for summer internships, for example. It could be undergraduate research, so not everything has to be an external work experience, right? It could be on-campus work, where you're getting real-world experience doing something. It could be a deeper project, but it has to be some sort of applied learning experience. And many colleges will tell you they do these, but I want to see examples. I want to know, okay, who's getting these? What are they getting? How difficult are they to get? Where have they gotten these internships or these other types of experiences? You want examples. It's very easy for a college to say, 90% of our students are employed 6 months after graduation, or 100% of our students in this major do some sort of experiential learning experience, but ask for the details.
And in some ways, it sounds like take what you can get, right? They are so in demand, and there are many ways to do it that to really take advantage of what might be at your fingertips it could be a great takeaway for that. So there's a persistent belief, especially in communities like this one, that attending a highly competitive high school can actually hurt a student's college chances. Yet research suggests the reality is much more nuanced. Elite schools often provide more resources and feeder pathways, but also come with higher expectations and tougher peer comparisons. How should students and parents rethink this trade-off, and what matters more in admissions today, the school you attend or how you distinguish yourself within it?
So I get this question a lot, right? Like, should we move districts, right? Because it's too hard to get into the most selective colleges from this school. So the big difference, what has happened over the last 20 or 30 years in particular, is the number of high schools applying to those top colleges. Remember, I said earlier, we have moved from more of a regional, local market for higher education among the national universities to now more of an international one. So, for example, 20 or 30 years ago, USC in LA used to have mostly students from California or the West Coast. Now they have the best students from New York and Boston and Chicago and Miami. And so what you're seeing, the year I spent inside the college admissions process at Emory, there are 25,000 different high schools in the US. 30 years ago, a place like Emory probably had applications from 2,000 of them, including, I would bet, New Trier among those back in 20 or 30 years ago. But as we've moved to this more nationalized market for higher ed, as I told you earlier, it's easier to travel to faraway places. Technology has made things seem a lot closer. The number of high schools applying, with applicants applying to these top schools, has in some cases doubled or tripled. So by the time I was at Emory, they had 8,000 different high schools represented in their applicant pool. And in many of those cases, they might not have as many applicants as a New Trier, but they have the top students from those schools applying, from those high schools applying to those. And remember, none of these schools, for the most part, have enlarged the size of their freshman class. So the number of seats they had in 1990 are essentially the same number of seats in their freshman class that they have in 2026. Meanwhile, 3 times as many applicants, twice or 3 times as many high schools applying. And that's why you're seeing, over the course of the years at a place like New Trier, you used to be able to get, maybe 15, 20 students into or 20 students might have gotten into, not you personally have gotten them in, right? But, 20 of them might have gotten in, and now maybe only 10 are getting in, or 5 are getting in. That's what's changed. It's the external pressures that are playing a role in how admissions is playing out.
Yeah, thank you. In your 2012 Chronicle article titled "Colleges and Employers Point Fingers Over Skills Gaps," you emphasize that employers value adaptability, communication, and critical thinking, yet often find graduates lacking these skills. More than a decade later, current research shows that many Gen Z students still struggle with these same interpersonal and workplace-ready skills. How should we redefine college-ready, and who is responsible for developing these essential skills?
Yeah, it's amazing how little things have changed over the course of time. And this is what we're seeing now, especially over the last 10 or 15 years, essentially since the Great Recession. The number of students who have very defined majors has increased dramatically. So we've seen this big increase away from the humanities and the social sciences and the liberal arts into STEM and business. And in fact, on many campuses, 80% of students major in basically 20% of the majors. And those 20% of majors are largely STEM and business, right? We have really made a huge move away from the liberal arts and the humanities because we have this impression, especially since 2008, that those majors lead to jobs. And they do. But what they often don't include, because they are so focused and they're so packed with requirements for those majors, is the things that employers say they value. Working in teams, writing, communication, problem solving, right? Some of those obviously built into business and STEM degrees, but often still are the power in the liberal arts. And so that's what we're not seeing, right? It's an either or, and the colleges that I think, and many of them we name in the back of the book, are the colleges that really require students to blend courses and majors in whether it's in STEM or business, along with taking liberal arts courses as well as humanities courses. Those students end up doing the best because they have these foundational skills.
My next question was literally about the amount of students applying to business and engineering. So you already kind of hit that point ahead, which is intense. So switching gears a bit. So with AI disrupting some entry-level jobs, while employers still cite gaps in human skills, how should students rethink the purpose of college? And what should they prioritize to build those durable, future-proof skills?
So we've never been great at guessing what the job market is going to be like in 4 years. And indeed, what we've seen since 2008, we've seen all of these students saying, oh, I'm going to major in computer science because it's going to get me a job. Well, last year, the number of computer science majors in the US dropped by 8% in 1 year. Because when we chase a major that we think leads to a specific job and the job market suddenly shifts, we think we also have to shift majors. And so I would love us to focus a lot less on majors. I see why we do. Because college, just like high school, is supposed to be a moment of discovery. Not every 18-year-old who goes off freshman year knows exactly what they want to do. And I get it, right? I get there are many colleges and universities out there that require you, especially in these high-demand majors, to apply to a certain major. But a third of students nationwide change their major at least once in college. And I think when we go in with a slightly more open mind, things could happen. I see this in my own family. I have a nephew who's about to graduate with a PhD in chemistry, really thought he wanted to be a pre-med and go to medical school. But sophomore year, he took a chemistry class with an undergraduate professor who just turned him on to chemistry and research. And he did a lot of undergraduate research, ended up getting his PhD. If he was so focused on something, he might not have thought about doing something else. And now he is pursuing really his dream career. There is Beth in the book who went to a small liberal arts college. She thought maybe she wanted to go into business eventually, but she was taught by a professor in her sophomore year who really turned her on to the law. And that professor then helped her get a summer fellowship where she did research in law. And then he said, have you ever thought about going to law school? And she said, no, I didn't really think of it. And he's like, well, we can help you, right? Our professors at this small liberal arts college can really focus on you. And she ended up going to Harvard Law School. Now, that's not that unusual, because if you look at the first year, every year, Harvard publishes the first year law school class and where they went to undergraduate institutions. And it's a fascinating list. I highly encourage you to look at it if you have kids interested in law school. Because what it will show you, more than 50% of the schools on there are big publics, small liberal arts colleges, places, in some cases, you might even have to look up because you never heard of them. And again, it shows you that we're not fully baked at 18. We're not even fully baked at 22 or even 53, right? And so we need more flexibility in that undergraduate education, and going in knowing exactly what you think you want to do doesn't give you a chance to always explore.
Yeah, and I think we see that a lot in our office, the conversations that we often have with students and parents about not convincing, but encouraging them to be open to even applying undecided, if they truly are. If they're not quite sure what they want to study, if they're torn between 3 or 4 different ideas, a college admissions office isn't expecting them to know exactly what and exactly why, and it's okay to apply and say, I'm not sure, but let me tell you about just broadly what I'm interested in. There can be some refreshing.
Yeah, but let me just add one thing about that. I have my own daughter at home, has no idea what she wants to do, and she thinks that's a problem. It isn't. So if there's undecideds out there tonight, not a problem. But one thing to look for is to go to a place, college or university, that has some sort of structure around undecided. Because one of the things a major does for you is give you a home. Right? It gives you a home within a school, it gives you a home within a department, it gets you connected to those professors and other students that I told you are so important. And if you're undecided and it just kind of lets you meander, that's not good either, right? So you're looking, one thing I'm looking for, as I even look at for my own daughter, is do they have structured programs for students who don't have a major coming in? How do they think about that?
I think we're really lucky that our state flagship has a really robust, structured program for exploring students. So I think we have time for maybe one more question. So in your 2011 Chronicle article titled, Colleges Need Some Big Ideas to Drive Change from Within, you discussed how digital badges, and you kind of talked about digital badges a little bit in the book too, had the potential to be a quote, game-changing strategy that could disrupt higher education's monopoly on credentials. Yet adoption has been limited. What lessons should we apply today to today's push for high school micro-credentials, and will they truly matter in admissions? We're seeing this kind of trend of that kind of high school micro-credential piece.
Well, you went deep into my archives, by the way.
I borrowed the New Trier Library catalog to look up some old articles.
I'm impressed. I think just like micro-credentials in high school, just like anything else, I got a question from somebody today about like what else do we need to do to differentiate our students, right? When everybody's taking X number of APs, participating in Y number of clubs and so forth, like what else do you have to do? And I think often these micro credentials in high school, like getting some sort of other credential, it could also be, by the way, dual enrollment, an IB, a degree, is trying to differentiate yourself in the college process. And one of the things, especially at these highly selective schools, that's really frustrating to us as parents, and by the way, even frustrating to somebody who writes about them, is there isn't one thing that gets you in, right? I'm often asked this question, like, what should I really focus on? Well, the first thing they're going to open up when they open up your application is the high school transcript. So if you're going to focus on anything, grades do matter, right? What the courses you took and the grades you got in them do matter, and they matter the most. Is it the only thing? No. When I was at Emory, I saw a student who had a 1590 on the SAT, so almost perfect, ranked third in her class of 1,000 students, never had anything less than an A. She was rejected within 5 minutes, outright rejected, because the rest of her application was pretty flat, right? Essays were pretty flat, really didn't participate in a lot of activities. And so you'll often hear during the admissions process this holistic admissions, right? We look at the whole student. Well, to you as the parent and to your kids as the applicant, it's really frustrating because what we really want is certainty. We really want some sort of certainty. And holistic admissions, while it sounds great, maybe you're not a great test taker. Maybe you don't have a lot of activities, but maybe you do really well in school, right? Or maybe you have a lot of activities, but you don't do great in school all the time, right? You love that idea of holistic admissions, but what it really is really ambiguous. And so it doesn't make sense to you as the applicant, which is why, by the way, we're starting to see students apply in Canada and the UK, because those systems are really specific about what they want, what they expect, and if you do it, you're kind of in. Where here, they could say all these things, you could do them, and not get it. And that's really confusing to us. It's both the strength and the weakness of this system.
Thank you so much. So before we get into the audience Q&A, I wanted to also shout out our students, your children, those that at least were able to attend today. Jeff had asked the audience at large not only to participate, which they did, but also to ask what are some things they're thinking about when it comes to the college process. And the things they mentioned, I was fascinated by. Graduation rate out of college, whether this school had a big sports team, I can see that, whether they have the program of study they want to pursue, the opportunities to network, what the alumni database looks like, campus life, Greek life, getting involved, community, and then just the overall quality of education and opportunity for small classes. So to hear those kind of points directly from students shows that a lot of them are really already on track, which is cool.
Yeah, and it was really refreshing because one thing I really encourage them is we often start the college search midstream. What do I mean by that? We start putting names on a list. Where do we get those names? We see them in our neighborhood. Maybe we went to those colleges. We just start putting names on a list. What I want to encourage your kids to do, you to do, is think about, what do I want out of this process? What do I want to be in college? What do I want college to be about? Or what do I like about high school? Or what do I dislike about high school? Think about the goals first, then start to put names to a school. To a list, because if you do the opposite, if you start with the names, you will end up like William, who was just so fascinated with going to these most selective colleges without realizing they weren't a fit for what he wanted.
Audience Q&A? Yes, perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
All right. Thank you so much, Bob. So a couple things. I do want to, is my mic on? You can hear me? Okay, so one thing I want to give a plug about, and it's something we've been really thinking about, and that is helping our kids understand what careers are available. So you should have received an email from me today. We're doing a career fair October 24th, and we're really looking for parents to be a part of that fair. So please, if you want to be part of it, share your career exploration. We really appreciate it. And what I was going to tell you, Jeff, is one of the things that our Dr. Tragos, our superintendent, is sitting here in the audience. One of the things that he's been doing with our strategic plan is really trying to find those experiential opportunities so students can actually go out, experience something while they're in high school to help them think about, what is it that I really want to do when I go beyond high school here? So we're in the midst of beginning all of that in the next 3 years, so we hope that that will have a great impact on our kids. Have you heard about schools that are having students experience some type of a career or looking into being?
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing to me. Most students get to senior year of college and they start applying for jobs, and many of them tell me, it's like a foreign language to me. I don't even know what most of these job titles are. Or they pick a career thinking that's what they want to do. A couple books ago, I met a student who went to the University of Virginia, wanted to be an architect, finally got to intern at an architecture firm his junior year of college and said, this is not what I want to do, right? So just even the fact of like job shadowing, getting just exposure to more than what they see around them, right? More than what you do, more than what their friends' parents do, more than they see in their community is incredibly important.
Thank you. First question, how would you advise someone who has completed their freshman year at college and decided the school wasn't a great fit after the fall application deadline passed to transfer this fall? And they were going to go into, it looks like a undergrad business program. What options do you think are available?
So, I mean, transfer is still an option the following year, right? So you could still transfer for your junior year. They could take time off and go to a community college and get some required courses out of the way while they transfer somewhere else. But also take a new look at the school. I talk in the book about what I call course corrections that are going to happen a lot, thank you, a lot during the process, including during the college search process, right? No matter where you are, and I know some of you are parents of freshmen, sophomores, and juniors, there will be a point where you think this is the direction we're going and something will change it, right? You'll get to that dream campus you thought was the perfect fit on paper, and then you get there and it's not really the perfect fit, right? Or you get denied from your dream school and you have to make a course correction at some point. And this could happen while you're in college. And I often tell students to look at the school in a new light. Maybe it's your major, maybe it's your roommate, maybe it's the clubs you have participated in. In many ways, it's like high school. If there's something that's wrong about high school, try to change something about the experience. And the same thing's going to happen during the college search, right? Always look during the college search for this chance at a course correction. Maybe we just need to look at a different set of schools. Maybe we need to look for a different major. There's so many points during the college search where you could give up on what you started with. Because remember, you're growing during this process, and so is your kid more than anything. The teenage brain is developing at a rapid pace between the ages of 16 and 18. And so every month during the college search is really like years in many cases in their brain. And so things are changing for them as well.
So earlier with the staff, you shared the number of applicants at like a UCLA. What is it, like
100,000+.
100,000+. So have colleges, are they thinking about shifting the importance of the application? And this particular question is the importance of essays, given the rise of AI, or will they?
So the thing that colleges have done during the application process is just keep adding more. They haven't really taken a lot away. And so they just want more and more information, which puts a lot of pressure on your kids, a lot of pressure on counselors. And then they decide what they really think is important once the application gets there. They're not really good at determining, there's certain things they know determine success in college. Right? They know high school GPA matters, right? They know rigor of high school courses matter. They know SAT and ACT scores matter often the first semester. They're a great predictor of freshman year grades. They're not as good of a predictor later on in college, which is one of the reasons why some colleges have felt comfortable going test optional. The essay, the recommendations, the list of activities, just gives them a sense of what else could this student do when they're here. But it's not really a direct correlation to success in college. And so they're really afraid to get rid of anything. Really what they want to do is try to figure out what else to add potentially. And here's why, because they're afraid that almost everything in the application can be gamed in some way, right? There's grade inflation. There is SAT and ACT prep, of course. There is, people who just, join every club imaginable just to fill out their application. Nobody really wants to give a bad recommendation, right? There's so many things. Essays can obviously be coached, and now with AI, even more coached. So what they really are looking for is some authentic way to try to understand a student. So we've been seeing more video. Video has been really entering a lot of schools in terms of like having more real authentic voices with the students. I can see that potentially moving in some direction, but given the volume, they can't figure out what will really give them an authentic view of the student, which is kind of unfortunate.
Thank you. Next question is, does the Dream School concept apply to direct admit for nursing programs, and how is it different?
So there are a number of programs out there where you do have to apply directly, whether it's business, engineering, nursing, a lot of highly popular seat-limited programs. And that's unfortunate, again, because I think many of these students feel like, is this really what I want to do? And then they get there and it could be, it could not be, right? And so to me, direct admit programs have to be the right fit for what you want, but more than that, it has to be, you have to be able to get in, right? Because some of these programs are hard to get in. So does the concept apply to those? Sure, in helping come up with a list of schools, but obviously your choices are going to be narrowed by those institutions.
So this question is about community college. So how does the community college first approach affect long-term outcomes? Did you have any information on that?
So community colleges, your ultimate degree is what's going to matter, right? So the key is being able to transfer. But here's the problem. And so I'm a big fan of the community college transfer model, right? Starting, especially if you don't know what you want to do, especially if your academics are uneven in high school and maybe you want to focus on some courses. Obviously it's a lot less expensive, especially as you're trying to figure out what to do. But here's the problem in some states, in some localities. On average, nationwide, 60% of students who go to community colleges want to transfer to a four-year college. 60%. 40% actually do. 20% earn a bachelor's degree. 60, 40, 20. So there's a lot of leakage in that pipeline. So if you are going to pursue that, again, great idea, but make sure a couple of things, like do they have a lot of college, this happens in Northern Virginia near where I live. Northern Virginia Community College has a direct admissions program with George Mason University. So if you get into Northern Virginia Community College in all these different programs, you could automatically get into George Mason University as long as you keep a certain GPA. You even get a George Mason ID as a community college student, so you feel that sense of belonging, right? And your courses automatically, your credits automatically transfer. That is not the case in a majority of colleges and universities. So what ends up happening is you finish your community college degree, you can't get into a four-year college, not all of your credits transfer. Ask those questions before you pursue that path.
All right, I have a quote. I love your books.
Oh, well, thank you. I don't know who said that, but thank you.
Thank you for thinking of this issue. So can you make any predictions about how the college search might change in the upcoming years as the job markets change with AI? And then, for example, will certain schools like the buyers have an advantage, or will elite schools come out as more desirable?
Okay, so the buyers and sellers are from who gets in and why. I classified them around financial aid. But a couple of things are going to happen. There's a lot of uncertainty in the market right now in higher ed. A lot of that's caused by we're about to enter a demographic cliff. So the number of high school graduates in the U.S. is dropping. And we still have all these spots, particularly at less selective colleges. There's obviously what's happening with the federal government is having impact on colleges. There's changes in federal loan rules for graduate programs. We have research programs being canceled, international students not coming, right? So there's all these macroeconomic issues facing colleges, and some who weren't in good financial shape to begin with. So there's a lot of uncertainty out there. That plays both ways for you as the applicant. One is it obviously creates more uncertainty in your world, but for some colleges and universities, they want more certainty. And so what are they going to do? They're going to offer more scholarships up front to get students to commit earlier if they really want to go there. So I think we're going to see a huge increase in early decision, more schools leaning in to early decision, early programs, early admissions in general. Early decision, remember, binding. You apply early, you get in early, it's a binding decision. Early action, you apply early. You often find out early. Sometimes you could be deferred. Many times you could be deferred, but you often find out early. But colleges really want more early applicants. And in fact, we're seeing students apply earlier and earlier, and I think that's going to be a trend in the future.
What percentage did we have that were early?
Like 100. Yeah.
30%.
Yeah.
Early decision,
Early
30%?
decision, about 30%, yeah. I mean, this just goes back to high school being a tryout for college. I'm not a huge fan of early action, early decision, right? Students really need time to play this out, and what happens with early decision was created decades ago for students who really knew where they wanted to go to get the process over with. Most colleges, up until 2008, accepted about 30% of their class early, 70% regular. After 2008, at those schools that could do it, early decision started to be 50% of the class, 60% of the class, right? Where they could lock in these students earlier and earlier. Great for the colleges, not as much for the students, right? Because students, I think, are rushed into making these decisions, and For those who are juniors, right, it's often moves up the college search process earlier and earlier into high school. And again, as I said earlier, high school should be about high school. It shouldn't be a tryout for college.
Thank you. So today we had a student that was asking you about what's a liberal arts college. This question's talking about a little bit what we heard earlier too, about they're closing at an increasing rate. Should students avoid those schools of that type?
So I'm a big fan of liberal arts colleges. I don't have a bias for big or small schools, but I do like liberal arts colleges because they focus on one thing, and that's undergraduate education, right? They're focused on you as the undergraduate. They're not worried about research. They're not worried about research at the graduate level. They're not worried about graduate students. They have a lot less distractions when it comes to that. Also, they bring students in a wider, with a wider lens on what they want to do. Often at many liberal arts colleges, you don't have to declare a major until your sophomore year. So you get to explore a little bit during freshman year to try to figure out what you want. Now, many people will say, but liberal arts colleges don't have great outcomes. And this is why they're not as popular anymore, right? We think, well, majoring in a lot of the programs that a liberal arts college has, often they don't have a wide array of STEM. They often have zero, if any, engineering programs. They don't really have a business school for the most part, right? They might have economics. Some of them do have a business in some ways, but most of them don't have those very popular programs. And as a result, people think, well, they're not going to have great outcomes afterwards. Well, one of the things that we did in the book is we looked at a price to earnings ratio. We looked at how much will it cost to go to the school over 4 years, and how much will you earn 8 years out. And one of the things we found, especially among the liberal arts colleges, is that 8 years out, many of those liberal arts colleges students are earning as much as those STEM and business majors at other places. It just takes them a while to catch up. So is the idea that you're unemployed, philosophy major or English major, or underemployed after college, there's some, there's a little bit of truth to that right after college, but eventually they do catch up. Now, this is obviously based on a job market that is under tremendous change right now, right? None of us can predict, including me, what the job market is going to be like, including my own sophomore at home, right? What the job market is going to be like in 7-8 years. But as I said earlier, we're very bad at predicting that. So to me, it is, what is this college going to provide in terms of those, both of those hands-on skills, but those foundational skills that I believe, even in an age of AI, are going to be critically important in any job in the future.
So today with the students, you were talking about kind of what colleges are looking for. You talked about the GPA.
Yep.
This question is, what is the benefit of playing it safe with easier classes versus taking more challenging load with potentially a lower GPA?
Question I get often, should I take the harder class, get the lower grade? Should I take the easy class, get the higher grade? You know what colleges are going to tell you? Do both, right? Take the harder class, get the higher grade, especially these highly elite colleges, right? Again, the applicant pool is so full of students who are getting great classes and great grades. And I'm not here to discourage. I'm afraid that after I tell these stories, right, you're like, oh my God, we'll never get into these places, right? But again, I think that it seems like we're all trying to figure out the system, right? It's a game that we're trying to play. And I really want us, because people always ask me, well, how do we switch? How do we change this, right? How do we change the idea of early decision and early admissions? How do we change testing and how important it has become to some schools? We're the change, right? Parents. Colleges are not going to change because it's a business to them. High schools are reacting to what the colleges are doing, right? All these companies that are, the marketing companies, if you are applying to college now, you're probably getting a ton of mail, right? The testing companies, they're not going to change. It really is up to us as applicants. And what I think the problem is that individually we might think this is a game we don't want to play, right? We want to have our kids enjoy their high school years. We want them to apply broadly. But the person next to you might say, well, I hope you do that because it'll be easier for my kid to get into fill in the blank, highly selective school, right? So it's a collective action problem. We kind of all have to agree together to try to change this process. And colleges know that, and they know that high school parents will never get that organized. And so they continue to set the rules of this game. And I don't mean to be cynical about it. I really want, you to know that this is happening, so you approach this as more of a product you're buying. Yes, colleges change lives, right? For many of us, college might have been the most significant years of our life, right? We figured out what we wanted to do. We figured out who we were. We met our best friends. We might have met our lifelong partner, right? It was a great 4 years of our life. And colleges know that as you're now touring with your own kids, and they pull at those emotional heartstrings. And they tell you, just spend a little bit more. Just apply here, do more. They're always asking you to do more. All fine and good, right? And colleges do that for you. They're great places. But you have to approach them just like you would approach buying a house, buying a car. Because at the end of the day, yes, it is a transformative experience for your kid, but it is also a very expensive product that you're buying, and you have to bring some level of consumer discipline around that, because what I see often happen is families stretch. Students make bad fits because they're not thinking of all of these other consequences.
I feel like this card's kind of about the Wizard of Oz. Who's behind the curtain? Who are the college admissions people who review applicants? How many people review an application?
Great question. We got that question today, whether they read every application. They do. So mostly at the big publics, they hire extra staff. They hire part-time staff. So when at the University of Washington, I sat in on their training. They trained mostly graduate students, some retirees, to do reading. They have a very small full-time staff. So that's a little bit of what's happening at the big publics. They bring in, sometimes it's high school counselors. I know a lot of high school counselors who do reading. I don't know if any of you do, but they might read outside of their territory. Obviously, they're not reading their own students. And then at the privates, which get fewer applications and are able to put more money into admissions, they're usually having full-time staff. So these are people, by the way, and I make this point to your kids, they're often the people visiting the school. So you probably have how many 50? 250 colleges, wow. Okay, 250 colleges visit every year. And the reps that visit from those colleges, they're full-time employees usually, they are often the same people reading the applications from New Trier. And I make this point to students, like, get to know them, right? So like when they come to New Trier to like do a presentation, go to the presentation, right? Get to know them a little bit, because they'll remember you. I was shocked in these admissions offices, especially at these, especially at the smaller private schools, basically Davidson and Emory in the book. The admissions officer will remember sometimes a student that they met. They also know the school really well as a result. So that's something that you could do. It's not a guarantee to get you in, but boy, does that give you a +1 on the score.
So this question reminds me of a friend that I have that their student they went abroad in the fall and then were allowed in the spring.
Yep. Very popular.
So, yeah. So is this, are these programs worth it? And is this about yield housing?
Yeah. So this is about, so there's a lot of these programs which are delayed entry. Some of them are run by a company called Verto. You'll often hear that term, this company that runs it, VRTO. I'm actually about to do a big piece on this because I'm very interested in this as well. So a lot of the highly selective colleges, they don't have enough room, but they have a lot of demand. And so what they're doing is taking a portion of their class and sending them either, they're delaying entry until the spring. Sometimes they're delaying entry for a full year. But more than that, they're saying, yeah, you could come here, but you have to, for Northeastern, for example, you have to start at our Oakland campus. You have to start in London, which sounds, by the way, great to me. But it's not everybody, right? It's a small cohort of students. You just have to ask a lot of questions, like, and that's what I'm doing right now. I'm trying to figure out, like, what is the retention rate of these students? But what they're really doing is by delaying your entry, they're filling in spots they know will open up in the spring or the following fall because students are studying abroad, they're going on internships, or they're leaving, right? So they'll have extra room in that sophomore class or that second semester of freshman year, and now they're filling them in with students they already have in the pipeline from these international programs, becoming very popular at these, Tennessee is running one now. So all these schools that are getting inundated with applications and they don't have enough room, that is now a new offering from them.
So we hear about kids building up their resume. Is it better to have students that are involved in a lot of extracurriculars, or to be a star in that just one, like debate or a sport? Or
This is one of those frustrating questions where there is no right answer. It's both. They're looking to build a class, right? And they don't want all leaders, and they don't want all followers, or all members of a group, right? So they're not looking for, a specific set of activities. They really want students who have committed to something, right? What they don't love is a student who discovered junior year, they're applying to college, and then suddenly in senior year signs up for 12 clubs and really hasn't made a commitment to any of them. It doesn't mean you can't sign up for a club your senior year and become really committed to it, but that's what they want to see. They want to see some level of commitment to something.
Any effective magic words that help kids and parents move away from the what should I do thinking to what interests me or what would I like to do for their high school experiences?
I think that we need to talk about college a lot less in high school. I think it has become like a 24/7 discussion. I'm in Reddit groups, I'm in Facebook groups, like it is just constant all the time, right? And so I'm doing this in my own house, I'm setting parameters up. The best one comes from my friend Rick Clark, who's the Dean of Undergraduate Admissions at Georgia Tech, who wrote a good book, The Family Guide to College Admissions. And one of the rules that he told me very early on is set a time aside once a week to talk about college. Maybe it's after dinner on Sunday night. And that's it. Now, obviously senior year, when you're trying to make a bunch of decisions about a couple of things, you're probably gonna have to talk about it more than once a week. But really talk about it, focus on it once a week, especially until you get into true depths of application season. And then spend the rest of the time enjoying your kids at home. Somebody once told me that 90% of your time with your kids is spent in those first 18 years of their life, right? So this is like a time to enjoy them and let them enjoy high school as well, and set those parameters up.
So sometimes what we'll hear too from parents is, well, they need to understand what to take so that they know that they are eligible to be able to apply to blank school. So trying to figure out that 4-year plan and making sure they're taking the right courses so that they have the resume that's going to be able to get them in. They have the number of years of math, they have the number of years of science. So it's hard sometimes not to talk about it when a lot of that.
Yeah, and you could do that around course selection, right? Yeah. No doubt about it. But most of the highly selective schools are going to be looking for the same set. Most colleges are going to be looking for the same set of courses. It really just depends on the rigor of those courses for different colleges.
Then a couple more here. How should an
You can move through these quickly if you want.
How should an applicant with one off semester explain that? What does that look like to the college application process?
Colleges know that's going to happen, and that could be either explained in the counselor recommendation or in an essay somehow. But what they don't love is something like this, right? They love more consistency up, consistency straight. Could be down, but they don't like a downward trend, and they don't want something that is bouncing up and down in terms of a student's performance in high school, unless there's a really good explanation for it.
All right, so last one, you talked about finding those opportunities at certain colleges, like internships, studying abroad. Who should they ask? Who do they contact? The admissions department?
Great question. Admissions tours are broken. They're terrible. They're terrible by and far. They really are. You're not going to really learn a lot on an official admissions visit, I hate to tell you. Some of them are good. I find most of them pretty lacking. And so if you're really interested, if there's certain, obviously you can't do this for all colleges, but check out the student newspaper. Check out those websites, go into those websites. Try to find other undergraduates beyond the official tour guides. That could be New Trier alums, for example, that might be there. Others that you might be able to discover through your network and ask them about these. And then in terms of those major specific things that I talked about, go to either the dean's office or the department chair, or write to the department chair, write to the dean's office. Sometimes you can find out from career services, but you often have to ask those questions. They don't generally advertise that widely, and you're often not going to find a tour guide because you might be interested in engineering and your tour guide might be an English major, for example, so they're really not going to know a lot about something else in another department.
Well, Jeff, thank you so much for spending the entire day here with us.
It's been great.
Let's give him a round of applause.
Thank you, everybody. Enjoy the process. Enjoy it. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Safe travels home. Might be a thunderstorm out there. I don't know, but yes. Rain, of course.